Now, our next interview is going to be something that a lot of you will relate to. Cancer, we know, is easily up there as one of the worst things in the world. It takes so many lives, it takes so many loved ones, and it tests even the strongest of people. And so many families and individuals have been affected by it. You'd be hard-pressed, in fact, to find anyone who hasn't been touched in some way, shape or form by cancer. It also ensures that people really need to show resilience and perseverance when they go through a cancer struggle. They are, though, people with cancer constantly living under this cloud of uncertainty. During their treatment, the biggest fear is whether the treatment will actually work, whether they'll survive this. Will I be cured? What's the best treatment? How can I ensure that I'll spend as much time with my family as I can? How can I beat this thing? And we know patients put their life on hold. They don't know what the future will bring. And afterwards, if they do beat it, then comes the fear. Will cancer return? Will it come back? Well, on the line is Chris O'Brien Lifehouse medical oncologist, Associate Professor Jane Beath, who is looking closely at this issue. Jane, good afternoon to you.
Oh, good afternoon, Deb. Thank you for having me on.
It is a real fear, isn't it, that patients, even if you've beaten cancer, you've got a good prognosis, that doubt, it's always there. Will it return?
Yeah. No, I think you've summarised it very well, that a lot of the attention from research is focused on curing people from cancer, which is obviously extremely important. And now we're curing more and more people, in particular breast cancer patients. We need to look at, we've cured them, but what their survivorship is and how they function and do they worry about it. And certainly, particularly young women with breast cancer, majority of those will have a sort of a significant fear of the cancer for returning. And to some people, it can sort of impact on lives, that they won't plan a holiday for the next year because they'll worry the cancer might come back. I mean, that's sort of an extreme situation, but it is been identified as actually a really big problem, and one that's actually not been addressed in general.
And I know you do tremendous work at the Chris O'Brien Lifehouse in managing all stages of cancer. What are you doing in this particular area to try to help manage people's fears?
Well, I mainly treat breast cancer, and I was involved in a prior study, which was a psychologist did. They initiated a trial, and they randomised women to assess and do an intervention to try and decrease the fear of cancer recurrence, and it actually showed that it actually worked, but it was quite labour intense and probably costly in doing 5 sessions for 1 hour over a few months period. So we thought, well, maybe what we can do, because the doctor can be quite powerful, but the problem is the doctor's often quite busy, running late. The last thing they sort of want to do is start thinking and open up a can of worms by starting to talk about this. And you can do that, is to try and just have a brief intervention where you can tell these people. And what's been shown is you actually just say to someone with cancer, you know what, it's normal to worry about the cancer coming back, can actually sort of have an impact on it, and there's sort of a relief that what they're worrying about is normal, and then to sort of talk to them. So we've designed a study for a doctor intervention trial where we actually just have a 5-minute so at the end of a consultation, telling them it's normal. And then it's like also he's sort of telling them what they should be worrying about and not worrying about. And also sort of some data has shown as you actually talk about prognosis, that people, that makes them sort of decrease their risk of fear of recurrence.
Again, it sounds to me as though information is key, knowledge is key. It's just expressing those fears and then getting the answers.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. A lot of things in life is actually communication is probably the most important thing. And we've put about 50 women on this trial already, and we're just starting to analyse the results. But the initial results actually do show that women do have this fear of recurrence, and there probably has been some effect at 1 and 3 months of actually decreasing that fear of the cancer returning.
So when will the final results be known, and how can it be actually used, this study that you're doing in general practice?
Yeah. Well, we've finished the recruitment and we're hoping to put an abstract in for the American meeting later in this year when we'll analyse all the data. And then there's the question of the next step. And generally, good scientific research would have a randomised trial where you'd randomise someone to the patients to the intervention or not to show whether it actually works. And we've been debating it because actually it's quite a lot of work and takes many years and quite costly to put a trial in, or whether we just circulate our handout and our sort of method of doing it again amongst oncologists and say this might be a good plan for you to discuss with your patients. But it would be optimal to do a proper trial.
And is it the case that really it's almost as though once a patient has been treated for cancer and they've received a good prognosis, obviously they have to have constant monitoring and they have regular contact with their doctors and within the health system. But is it one of those questions that people are just scared to talk about, that it's a niggling fear, but they almost feel as though they might be jinxing themselves or they just don't want to address that fear?
I think it's really interesting, and what I've learned from the psychologists is metacognitive therapy, which is really interesting, and it's a sort of a therapy that, exactly what you're saying, if you worry about something coming back, it's more likely it will come back, or if you don't worry about it coming back, it won't come back, and that's that sort of thing, and I think it's exactly it. If I talk about it, maybe it will come back, and it's important to address those sort of issues, that it is normal, but you better actually, and reassuring them that if they talk about it and they're doing everything possible to stop the cancer from coming back. And also the fear of cancer recurrence can stop people from going to regular appointments, and probably maybe they're worried that they'll find that the cancer's come back, and to actually tell people that it's normal and the best thing is to actually go through all the treatment and get on with their lives.
And I know that well-meaning people will often come out with comments that can be sometimes hurtful and sometimes damaging, but I often hear people say, just if you don't be stressed, you'll be fine, that'll help you out. Stress is a big contributor. It seems to be this sort of myth. I don't know if it is a myth, but is there any truth to the fact that that stress and that worrying could actually add to any of the concerns? Could it add to any of the health outcomes that the cancer might return?
Well, I mean, I think too much stress is bad for anyone, and I think that it's not good for a cancer patient to actually be stressed, and it means that they don't actually manage living with the cancer as well. I think it's tricky trying to work out whether stress actually causes cancer to come back, because you sort of can't do a randomised trial saying that person's stressed and that person's not. And I think the bottom line is there's probably no evidence showing that stress will make the cancer come back, but it's better to not be stressed because that will make you a healthier person and hopefully you'll do better from the cancer.
But it's so hard to achieve, isn't it? I mean, you're going through one of the most stressful things in your life. It's impossible not to be.
Oh, no, it's very, very common. And I think the cancer patients do not realise the difference. They've got cancer is a very black and white thing rather than a good cancer or a bad cancer as well. And the fear of relapse is across all different types, even if someone's got a very good prognosis.
And it's a concerning thing too, as you say, in adults, but then in children too, when you've got a child who suffers from cancer, even though many of the childhood cancers, the treatment is quite successful, the treatment rates, but the worry and the concern that would cause amongst parents too is something that eats away.
I can't imagine what it would be like. I mean, not only the child but the parents and what's going to happen with them. And I suppose the consequences of them, they're young and it's sort of planning for the future. So do I have infertility? All these other sort of issues come out as well. And that's the sort of, especially with younger women with cancer and how it's actually going to change their future. Yeah,
it's an interesting study and I'm glad that you're doing it. We'll follow up and see how the results come through. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thanks for having me on, Deb. Okay,
Jane
bye.
Beath there, who is Associate Professor and Medical Oncologist at the terrific Chris O'Brien Lifehouse, and the work that they do helping families and individuals impacted by cancer is just phenomenal. All applause to them, and if you're interested in that trial, get in contact with the Chris O'Brien Lifehouse.